Well, welcome to the More to the Story podcast. I'm so glad that you all have come along for this episode, which is going to challenge your thinking. Those of you who love to have everything in just the right spot, I have some ideas for you for the ways that we can think about who God is calling our institutions to be, and even who he's calling us to be as people who are ready for the opportunities that he puts in front of us. But before I do that, you know, this podcast comes to you from Wesley Biblical Seminary, where we are developing trusted leaders for faithful churches. We serve a host of denominations, including one of the newest denominations that exist in the world, the Global Methodist Church. We have more than 400 students from the Global Methodist Church at WBS right now. We have bachelor's, master's, and doctoral degrees, certificate programs, lay initiatives. We'd love for you to check us out at WBS.edu. I'm honored to serve as a president of this institution. I've been doing so for just a couple of months and excited about the future God has for us. Also, I'd love for you to sign up for my email list at andymillerthird.com. That's andymillerIII.com. And if you sign up for my email list, I'll send you a free tool called 5 Steps to Deeper Teaching and Preaching. It's a video and a 8-page PDF document that you can use in your own sermon preparation. I'd love for you to check that out. And when you go to my website, you'll see some other things there. For instance, I have a short course for Sunday school classes on the book of Jude. There's also another course on heaven that's available there. All of that you can find at andymillerthird.com or at wbs.edu. All right. I am so glad to welcome to the podcast my new friend, Dr. Roger Parrott. Roger, when Roger serves as the president of Belhaven University, he's been there for a couple of decades. Roger, welcome to the podcast.
Well, thank you. And it's been 3 decades and I haven't aged a bit. You can tell.
Oh, man, I'm sorry.
Yeah, higher education is the easiest job in the world. So
I'm not sure.
Yeah. I am so glad you're at Wesley Biblical Seminary. As we've gotten acquainted just a little bit, I'm just so thrilled about you and your future. You are one of the bright, shining stars of the future of Christian higher ed and seminary world. So what a treat to have you in town and just to be my friend.
Amen. I'm with you. That means so much coming from somebody like you. And you have the scars and the experience and the buildings and the vision, that you've had. And that truly means a lot. And you have an interesting perspective because I've never met anybody who comes from a line like yours. Tell us a little bit. I mean, when I came in and saw your office, you even told me about some of that. I'm trying not to give away the clue as to what it is, but tell us about your legacy.
Yeah, it is unusual. I grew up in the Church of the Nazarene, and I continue to. I think I'm technically retired in their records, but retired Nazarene minister, and I've been president of Presbyterian colleges for 36 years. So it's all worked well, and the church can come together in great ways. And I love the Presbyterians, and I love the Nazarenes and the Wesleyan church, and we've got so much more in common than we do in different. And that's kind of why I focus, because I've done a lot of work through the Lausanne Committee for World Evangelization. Yeah. I was U.S. director of that leading up to the '89 Congress, and then raised the money for 1989 in Manila. And then we just had the 4th Congress, and I've been part of that for 25 years. So it's been an important legacy. But the family legacy is out of the higher ed world. My grandfather and my father were both college presidents, and I work at my grandfather's desk that he had made back in the 1930s, big partner's desk. And so kind of great to have that legacy. It's not something I set out to do. I wrote some stuff about not planning, and I did not plan this. I never planned to be a college president. We can talk about that if you want to, but God has led that way, and it's been a great journey, and I feel like I'm just getting started. We got so much more to do, and Belhaven's a great place to do it.
Amen. It's so interesting that there has to be things that you just learned around the dinner table, the Thanksgiving table, that people just don't have those experiences. And as I've been in this role for a couple of months now, I just realized and being around your table was very helpful to me when we went to lunch together, because I realized in that moment, oh man, there's so much experience here that it just can't. very few people have been in these seats. But you sat around a table with a father and grandfather who are doing exactly what you did. Tell me about that
I
blessing
did,
that
but
that was.
everybody assumes, well, they taught you so much about how to run colleges. They didn't teach me anything about how to run college. And I think that was part of Dad's genius, especially. He never brought it home, ever, ever.
Okay.
I found out after. I mean, I was in high school while he was college president, and then attended the school. I never knew the problems he had, the number of reorganization, people he had to let go, difficult. I never knew that stuff until after I was gone and he was gone. And I
Wow.
read it in the history because he would never talk about it. The family was separate, and when he came home, the family was not going to be in college business. So I think I did learn that from him to try to
Interesting.
separate that out, and that's been important. But he only taught me. He did teach me two very specific things about college
Okay.
presidency. He said, first, learn to live with ambiguity.
Okay.
And, there's so much as leaders we want to pin down, but you can't. And
Mm,
you've got to learn to live with a certain level of ambiguity and be comfortable with it. And if you're always fighting against some ambiguity, I think the leadership fight's awfully hard because especially the farther you go in leadership, the bigger the organization, the more complex the organization, you can't get there. And
yeah. Yeah.
Dad always said there are only two problems: money and people. There aren't any other
Wow.
problems. Those are the two. And but those problems are ambiguous. So he told me that, and the second thing he told me was, which was really good advice. He said, wherever you go, assume somebody knows you. And
Oh, interesting.
you and I live in a town where we are known in this city, and so I go to the grocery store and get recognized and that kind of stuff, and that's okay. But I saw you on the news, yeah, well, but any place. I remember a great illustration that I was on an airplane a number of years ago, and it was one of those flights where delayed, and finally got off, and everybody's pushing the aisles, and I was about to go crazy, and trying to get the suitcase and all, and somebody was shoving it in front of me, and you wanted to just say something,
Yeah.
and I
Yeah.
remember Dad's word, and I did it, and so we started to move, and pretty soon I get a tap on my shoulder. Hey, Dr. Parrott, I'm gonna Lama Bellhaven from behind me.
Oh man. Yeah.
And so, that's pretty good advice for everybody because the Lord knows us wherever we go. So
Yes.
if we live that way,
Yes.
it usually comes out better.
Absolutely. What an interesting thing to be able to have that perspective that maybe helps you think about your behavior going forward. Well,
Yeah.
I'm really interested in this book. You gave it to me when we were together for lunch. It's published by Moody. It's called Opportunity Leadership. Stop planning and start getting results. Well, talk about ambiguity, Roger. I mean, there it is. I
Yeah.
mean, people normally say, if you fail to plan, you plan to fail. But I mean,
Uh,
you're going in a completely different direction, which is a
yeah.
surprise.
I would say those who say if fail to plan, you're plan to fail are planning for mediocrity. So that's what
Wow.
they're planning for. And you'll hit it. And so congratulations and isn't that great? Because that's part of the problem of planning, that there are many pitfalls to planning. But and when I talk about planning, I just put the caveat at the very beginning. I'm talking about long range planning, what I
Okay.
call destination planning. People will say to me, well, what do you expect Belhaven University to be 5 or 10 years from now? And my answer, which I've even said on television, is I have no idea. But what I do
Wow.
know is that the best plan we could come up with on whiteboards sitting around conference tables is pale in comparison to the plan that God has for us. So we're going to
Amen.
watch for his opportunities. We're going to capture the moments that he brings, and we're going to go where God leads us to go. Now, that's
Mhm.
long range planning. Some people call it strategic planning. A lot of consultants who make a lot of money on that. That's fine. But what we do is we do operational planning. I know I'm going to have a football team this fall, which has done pretty well. And I
Okay.
know that we're going to teach English and we're going to have students living in residence halls. So we plan how to do what we know God's given us. We don't plan where God might take us in the future. That's in God's hands. And so that's probably the difference. And so 22, 23 years ago, I gave up planning. I did it the other way before. I did the typical long range plan. You appoint the blue ribbon committee, you get all excited, and you go through everything and you make a list of all this stuff. And for most, especially for colleges and seminaries, but even for churches, I could probably give you, and you could too, the five goals that they're going to come out with at the end. You already know what they are, and
A
and so you come up
building,
with that.
this,
Yeah, yeah,
more
we're going to
staff.
increase
Yeah.
the enrollment, and we're going to build this, and we're going to make it a better experience, and da da da. So it's all pretty predictable. And then you put some numbers around it that are nice round numbers, and it doesn't do anything. It takes a lot of energy, but there are a lot of downsides to it as well. And that's where I'm concerned is that we
Okay.
get so caught up in our plan, our dedication to a planning model, because as leaders, we think that's our job is to plan
Right.
a
Right.
future. And it's harder to help build a culture that captures opportunities than it is to plan a future. Plan a future is kind of easy in comparison.
Mhm.
So creating a culture that's in your organization, church, educational institution, nonprofit, even business. The president of Krispy Kreme read the book and he said, this is exactly what we did to turn around
Wow.
Krispy Kreme. Um, um, you know, we get so caught up in that process, we miss God's opportunities because we think we're doing God's plan.
Right.
Well,
Right.
what is the doing of God's plan? God is, we pray at the beginning, God, please guide us to make a plan. And then we go sit in conference rooms for 6 months and we come up with a plan. Then God asks God to bless it at the end. And, I'm not sure it's a very dependent posture for the future for Christian leaders. Um,
Interesting.
so we don't have a plan. If you come to our website, there's no Bellhaven 2030 that lays out where we're going to go, what we're going to be. We look for opportunities and we have a culture that captures them. There are really 8 reasons. I feel like planning is not only planning for mediocrity, but it's really detrimental to what you're doing. Because first of all, we aim for targets we know we can hit.
Okay.
And you put in a target, and whether that's your Sunday school growth or your enrollment growth, whatever, you put in a target. Yeah, it's a bit of a stretch, but you're fairly sure if everything works well, we can do it. And
Mhm.
so that's what you aim for. You hit it, you celebrate, isn't that great? And so, I did a little experiment. In fact, I wrote about this in the book. And then after the book came out, I thought, I need to do that again. I did it again, and the results were even more dramatic. But the one I wrote in the book was that we were into it about 15 or 16 years with no planning. And
Mhm.
I took to the board a piece of paper, and it said 5-year plan. And it said 5-year plan. We're going to increase the enrollment 43%. We're going to raise $21 million in new gifts. We're going to build $30+ million in new buildings. We're going to
Yeah.
start 7 undergraduate programs, of which one was nursing. We're going to start 8 graduate programs. This is the plan. And as I walked through it, I used language carefully when I got to the end of the illustration to say, that's not the plan for the next 5 years. That's what we actually did the last 5 years.
Interesting.
Now, here's
Without a
the
plan,
thing.
without a long
If
range plan.
if I had brought those goals to that board 5 years previously,
Yeah.
we would have cut them all in half
Wow.
easily. And we would have hit them and we would have said, isn't this great? We're doing wonderful. Well, no, we missed half of what God had for us because we didn't have a plan. So we aim for targets we can hit. Secondly, we homogenize our strength. You cannot, as a church or as an organization, educational institution, have a plan and leave some group out.
Mm.
You'd have
Wait,
World War III.
let me jump
So
in there. So homogenize your strengths. Is that what you said?
right, it
Uh,
homogenizes your strengths.
oh, it
So
by not investing too much in long range planning,
no,
or
no,
it
you,
does.
you don't put the investment in the things that are your real strength because you're trying to make everybody happy. So you put a little bit of investment in everything,
Okay,
and your
gotcha, gotcha.
strengths go under supported. And we're really big in the arts, very big in the arts. We're one of only 38 schools in the entire country nationally credited in all 4 of the major arts: music, theater, visual art, and dance. Those are very hard to get. They're really hard to get for a Christian college because they don't necessarily like our behavioral standards. And we're the
Right.
only Christian school that's doing that, the only one. If we had had a plan, we could not have put the money, the emphasis, whatever, in the arts when at the same time the soccer team was playing on a cow pasture, and the STEM folks didn't have the right equipment. But we put it
Yeah.
in the arts because God kept opening doors in the arts. If we'd had a plan, we would have put a little bit into everything, and nobody would have made any progress. And
Hmm.
so in planning, we homogenize our strengths rather than build on those things that we can do the very best. And
Interesting.
opportunities lead to that. So I think the third one's a really important one to me, is that's the long range planning primarily focuses on deficiencies.
Hmm.
There's nothing in the plan that celebrates what we have. We
Hmm.
celebrate what we look at, focus on what we don't have. And in focusing on what we don't have, it makes everybody discontented with what we do have. Well, God
Hmm.
gave us what we have. How about we just be thankful for that and rejoice in that, and then say, Lord, if you want us to have more, great. If you don't, we'll be good stewards of this, and that's okay. But we planning is all about what we don't have. Can we get that in the plan, et cetera, et
Yes.
cetera. I just real quick, I was taking too long, but empty productivity, spend a lot of time in planning that really doesn't accomplish anything. I had a dean the other day write me and said, "Thank you for not having planning meetings on this campus." He said, "My last institution, I spent so much time in planning, and it didn't matter one bit," and it really
Hmm.
doesn't. So now they do plan for mission coalition. That's different from planning,
Well, what
beginning a
would that be
dream.
then? What's Mission Coalition?
Well, you've got to know what your mission is. What are
Yeah.
you what are you called to do that nobody else can do?
Right.
And in fact, in the book, I got a bunch of hard questions about mission. And the first one is, what difference would it make if you went out of business? What
Sure.
difference would it
Sure.
make if your church closed? If your
Right. Right.
school closed, if my school closed, what difference would it make?
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and you build back from that, and a lot of questions to see, well, really get agreement on mission. Because if you don't have a plan, the question I always get is, well, how do you know what to do, which opportunities? Because
Hmm.
opportunities don't come, I mean, they say opportunity knocks. No, it doesn't. An opportunity very quietly sneaks up on you.
Interesting. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
we use a model here of sailboat versus powerboat, and opportunities come as a very, very gentle breeze at the beginning. And if
Yeah.
you're
Oh.
not sensitive to them, you don't even see them.
Hmm.
And and they come by somebody you meet, some door that gets open, something that comes you can't make happen.
Hmm.
And then you see God working it. But
Let me
uh,
interrupt you there. That
yeah.
guy's so I'd love to get an example of how it sneaks up on you. So, for instance, it's very obvious to me the first time I drove through the Bellhaven neighborhood that came on the Bellhaven campus to see, like, just I didn't know you at the time. I thought, well, somebody has had a plan. That's right. And I thought, look at this beautiful football stadium lodged right in the middle here. My boys were participating in a basketball camp in your gym, so I went there and I saw that, and everything just seems so well laid out. But I imagine that that's all happened probably in the last 20 years or so. So, or obviously you've been there more than 30. If this has been a part of this time where you've been dependent upon finding these gentle breezes of opportunities. Tell me about one of those that happened. Like, what was an example of that?
Oh, there's so many of them, but let me tell you about one that relates especially to my Methodist friends. We were growing in the arts, as I said, it's a big deal for us, and the arts were taking off like crazy. And so I met with the architect and said, we need to build an arts center, and we've got this music, we got theater, we got dance, we got visual art, and we've added film and creative writing since then, but. They just need chalk mostly, which is good. But the but we did. So they gave me a plan, and it was like 25, $30 million for phase one. Well, I've been around Christian world long enough to know that if you get phase one, you're never getting phase two or three. That's it. So
Mm,
phase one is all there's ever going to be. I mean, how many
wow.
churches have built phase one and never built two or three? They don't.
Interesting. Yeah.
And we didn't have place for parking. There was all kinds of issues, and we sure didn't have that kind of money. So I really didn't know what to do. I thought, God kind of picked us out to start this thing in the arts. We just celebrated 30 years of dance. And when we started in dance, nobody in the Christian world was doing dance, which is
Right.
kind of funny for, as I told the alumni on Saturday, for a former Nazarene to be, who
I
got a
won't tell
note to get
anybody,
out of
Roger.
dancing
I won't tell
in
anybody.
seventh grade. Yeah, class. Uh, we didn't know what to do. Well, as I was near our campus was a large independent Methodist church,
Right. Riverside,
and
right?
yeah, on Riverside. And that church had established there when things kind of changed downtown at the church, and they came there and they built a sanctuary for 1,000 people. And by the time I got inspired to go talk to them, they were down to about 25 people. So it was
Mm,
quite a facility. But I don't operate this way. I mean, my theology doesn't operate this way, or my emotions. But I was driving home one day about 4 o'clock in the afternoon. I was frustrated about the Arts Center, and I saw that building. I drove by it every day, but I'd never really noticed it because we couldn't
yeah.
have it. And I pulled in the parking lot and I drove in, no announcement, walked in. I found the fat pastor, who I found out later was part-time, so he usually wasn't there, happened to be there.
Mm.
And I introduced myself. I said, I don't know you and you don't know me, but I want to buy your church. And he said,
Ha!
well, not for sale. And I said, well,
Wow.
I haven't got any money, so we're starting on a right together. And he said, would you like to see it? And I said, yeah. I've never seen a facility so perfectly designed as a collegiate arts facility ever. It had
Mm,
beautiful auditorium, stained glass windows with acoustics to die for musicians. It had a gym, which we made into black box theater. It had all
mhm.
these 1970s Sunday school rooms, which are too small for Sunday school now, but they work great as faculty studios. I mean, on and
Yeah.
on and on. So we started discussion, and they thought maybe in 7 years we could buy it because they had people in the church who wanted to be buried and have their funeral there.
Mm,
And long story short, but I think they had a comfort in me because of my Nazarene background and who we were and what we were doing. 7 months later, we owned that facility.
wow.
They didn't want the money all at once, which is interesting because they're afraid they'd spend it all, so they wanted it over time. But here's the really fun part of this story. So we take the thing over. I think we bought it for $1.8 million. We put about $3 million in it. So for $5 million less, for less than $5 million, we got a equivalent of a $30-40 million building that we would have had to build.
Wow.
So we had the first chapel. We have a required chapel, and I was preaching that day, and the place was packed to the rafters. I mean, every seat was filled. We had students sitting in the aisle. We had students sitting every place. And I invited the church board to come. At the end of
Mm,
that service, I came down, and the chair of the church board's got tears in his eyes. He said, every day for 30 years, I prayed God would fill this church. He said, I never expected it to happen like this. And
wow.
so it was our answer to prayer, and it was their answer to prayer. And that church has
Yeah.
moved and has flourished since and done very well. That's one of the ways in which these things just happen. You can't plan that. It just happens as you're responsive to God's will. But if we had had a plan that said we were going to spend $8 million for an art center because that's what we could afford, we never even would have taken the moment, never even would have sensed the opportunity because we'd be so focused on the plan.
Wow. Thanks for letting me interrupt. I know you're kind of on point five there, but that's
No,
really helpful to hear what you're doing. I got you off track, but it's such an
no.
interesting idea because you can think about these moments that come and they're around the corner here and there. And if you're too locked in to a strategic plan, long range plan, you would say, no, that's not what we're doing. And you'd missed a chance for that sort of whispered
And as
opportunity.
leaders, we box ourselves in because we appoint this plan, whether that's in the church or the university. We appoint a plan, we announce it. Here's what we're going to do, and then we come back and say, no, we're going to do something else. Well, Who's leading? Who's in
Yeah,
charge?
yeah,
We thought you
yeah.
said we're doing this. No, we're not doing this. And I had a real life example of that when I first got here, we were doing traditional planning. I appointed the blue ribbon committee. I did the whole thing. We had the plan. The plan came out, and I was at my second commencement, and I was in the lobby at the end, seeing students and whatever. And a guy walks up who I had hired as a football coach at my other institution where I was president before I got here. And he came in. I said, "What are you doing here?" I said, "I thought you were in Kansas." He said, "No, they fired me. And I'm back in Mississippi." I said, "I didn't know you were from Mississippi." He said, "Yeah, I'm from right up the road." And we talked for a couple of minutes. And I said, "How would you like to start a football team?"
Huh.
And that was in the plan, but I knew it would scare everybody to death, so I had buried it down like 5 levels. So someday we'll think about whatever it might be, da da da, and we got going, and we started a football team. But
Mm.
the problem is leaders box themselves in with plans, so you can't do other things. The other problem, back to point five, just to follow
Gotcha.
up, is the planning builds unrealistic expectations. Because in
Mm.
a plan, everything looks great. Everything looks
Mm.
perfect. The world doesn't work like that. And all the growth graphs are smooth, and they all go up, and it's all going to be great. And they usually slow at the beginning because we want to give ourselves a couple of years. And it goes up, and it all looks great. And nothing works out that way ever, ever,
Mm.
ever.
Mm.
And as you said, you drove through the campus, you've seen a lot of new stuff in the I built. I think 21 buildings. I'm not sure. It's a bunch.
Wow.
I don't do architectural renderings anymore. Haven't for
Oh,
years.
interesting.
Well, first of all, I found out they charge you for them. They're expensive.
Yes,
And
that's right.
I didn't know that in my first few buildings. I thought, well, that's nice. They did that for us. Yeah, here's a bill. But the bigger
Yeah, I've seen
problem
those.
is there is no building in the world that can look as good as the drawing. It's
Right.
impossible. So when the
Right.
actual building comes out, people are disappointed because the
Yeah.
drawings look so good. So I don't do them just because of that. Same thing with new employees. I tell new employees the only thing you can do is disappoint us because we have it so built up in our mind that you're going to finally be the solution to whatever problem we have. And as soon as we hire so and so, and as soon as they get here, then this is going to be fixed. Nobody's that perfect. Nobody can do
Mm.
it. So we build up this expectation of who people are. They can't perform at that level because nobody can. And then we beat them up for doing it. And it's not their fault. You know, again, unrealistic decision. Number six, real quick, it delays decisions because you're doing this planning process and you go, well, we got this opportunity to do this in Sunday school. Well, let's wait till the planning process comes through. We'll see how that fits in. So you delay everything down the road and you don't get it done. I think people say, well, if you don't have planning process, how do you have the dialogue? I think planning limits the dialogue because it
Mm.
limits it to those who are put in that group. And
Mm.
so, I mean, my campus knows, pop me an email, stop me on the sidewalk, share with one of the VPs an idea. Some of our best ideas come from the folks who are doing this stuff every day,
Mm.
and from students as well. And then lastly, it focuses on contrived numbers. Why does everybody have a fundraising campaign for 1 million or an enrollment goal of 250 or whatever it may be? Those aren't plans. Those are marketing tools. And that's fine. There's nothing wrong with marketing tools, but let's call them what they are. And, I mean, those who have plans right now are all got a plan for 2030, what we're going to be in 2030.
Right. Sure. Sure.
Got a plan for 2029 or 2031. Why
Right.
2030? Because it's a round number and it's easy to explain.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
that's not planning. That's marketing. And that's fine. There's nothing wrong with marketing. I'm a big marketer. But, I think we got to get a realistic picture of planning. And here's the thing. I think there is a great alternative. I call it opportunity leadership. And to get away from planning, to trust God for opportunities, to look for them, to build a culture of people who expect that and respond to opportunities, who are okay with starting stuff, and if it doesn't work, to stop it. And all that goes with that. Because as leaders, we live under this enormous pressure that the only way I can show my leadership is through planning. And
Mm.
that is not at all true.
Mm.
When the book first came out, I had a college president call me. He said, I stayed up all night reading your book. He said, for the first time, I don't feel guilty. I
Wow.
don't
Yeah.
feel guilty that I'm not planning because it doesn't do any good. And now I've got something to substitute. And I've had so many people say, this is what I'm trying to do, but they don't have the language to
Mm-hmm.
put it out there. And so, for a lot of pastors, educational leaders, nonprofits, and again, corporate people, I've had a lot of corporate people really interested. It's so different. Nobody else is talking about this, but it works. And that's the whole
Mm.
thing. We know long range planning doesn't work. There's no question it doesn't work. But worse than that, I think we settle for less than God's best because we
Mm.
get so stuck on our plan. If you
Yes.
let
Yes.
go of the plan and you trust God for the future, I mean, if God wants to close this institution, that's his choice, not mine. If he wants it to
Yeah.
thrive, that's his choice, not mine. I'm going to be a great steward of what he's given me. He's given me a
Yes.
responsibility to get the very most out of what we have, and that's what I'm going to do. And if he wants to do something different, it's all good.
Amen. When we met, I was working on my inauguration address at that point, and I had a little section I hadn't quite completed, and I figured people want to know my goal, my long range plan. Is this the time, 2 months in, for me to
Yeah.
announce my long range plan? I think I've been at this institution, but I'm still trying to figure out, where all the doors are. I'm still trying to
Yeah.
figure out
Right.
where
Exactly.
things go. But I ended up because you handed me your book. In part, I said, I'm not announcing that we're going to get to 3 or 4,000 students, though I think it's very reasonable given our model that we would get there. I'm not going to say that this is our goal, but I just want to acknowledge this publicly now. Is the Roger Parrott moment where I said, but we will be ready for the opportunities God
Good for
gives us.
you.
And if that opportunity means, like, as WBS started in a double wide trailer in Florence,
Right.
then we're going to do
Right.
that. We're going to we're going to hold to our convictions, to our
Yeah.
mission. But
Yep.
I think everybody could sense, and my desire is that, well, there's more people for us to serve. There's more students
Right.
for us. So let's
There
be
are.
ready to respond.
Right.
Roger, I'm interested. How is it, like you working with donors in this case? Because I've had a donor say to me, well, once I see that long range plan, once I see that master plan, let me know. And then I'll know where you're going. So I'm
Right.
sure you've heard that
Right.
same sort of thing.
Oh yeah, absolutely. You have to retrain the donors. Boards are the worst on that because boards come out of a corporate world where planning is their measure of success. So you have to retrain and help people to understand this is different. This is not just a structure. This is a theology of total dependence on God, and it takes that to do it. And it takes an understanding of your mission, gifting, and capacity. And when you understand that, that's when you can fit in the opportunities as they come along. But boards push for planning, but donors do as well. And absolutely do. You have to help them see. The way you help them see as you look back at the good things that happened to Wesley Seminary. Did they
Yes, yes.
come through a plan or did they come through an opportunity? And
Right.
where did they come from? Almost every time they came through an opportunity, they did not come through a plan. And
Mm.
the opportunities is where God moves and works. And so you have to help your donors to understand. I don't know what's ahead, but we want to be ready for those opportunities. One here that I was facing a couple of years ago was that I knew that with the regulations of the city of Jackson, we can't get any bigger if we didn't have more parking. It wasn't an option.
Yeah.
And so I talk about that with the board. I talk about that with donors. I said, I don't know what the solution is. Parking garage is way too expensive. It costs way too much. We haven't got the money for it. We can't do that. Nobody wants to give their parking garage. I don't know what we do. Maybe we just say what we've got's where God wants us, and God put that limit there. Because part of this model is to learn to love roadblocks, and that may be one of those. And so
Interesting.
during COVID, one of my dear friends of the school called me and she said, Roger, do you still need that parking garage? And I said, well, yeah, I would need it like crazy. And she said, how much is it? I said, it's probably 8 to 9, maybe 10 million. It's real quiet. And she said, what else you got?
Oh my goodness. Yeah.
Looking for something cheaper.
Yeah,
And
that's
so
right.
we
No,
looked
no,
at,
not that.
and as I mentioned a couple of things, yeah, as a president, you've always got ideas in your head of things you'd like to do if you ever
For
had the
sure.
money. But that's different from setting out to do them and putting the stake in the ground, saying, no matter what, we're going to get this done. And so I told her, I finally said, would you like me to get your price? So I got her price. It was 10 million bucks. And she thought about it for a few days and prayed about it. She said, let's build it. And
Wow.
so, and then the final price was 12 million, and she made up the extra couple of million bucks. So, again, donors, I've had more gifts through no plan than I've ever had through a plan. And
Mm,
usually those plans are done for donors. What you have to give donors is credibility. And a plan does give a credibility. So it's a
yes.
credibility, and the credibility can be, here's our strengths. Here's the kinds of things we do really well. Here's the clarity of our mission. Here's what we could, kinds of things we could do if God opened the right people, the right doors, whatever it might be, and then dream a little bit with the donors rather than taking them. Here's the one thing we're going to do, give up or down, dream
Right,
with them a
right,
little
right.
bit, find out where their interests are. And sometimes those opportunities come through donors. So,
Yeah. Well,
yeah,
and I think that invites them to be in on the journey too. Like,
absolutely. Yeah,
somebody
yeah.
said to me, kind of a seasoned fundraising person, said, and I think this is true, that if you want money, ask for advice. If you want advice, ask for money. And so,
There
like,
you go.
and what that does, I mean, is like, if you,
Yeah,
I mean, and I've seen it work out that way. Like, if I say, hey, I really need $500,000 to do what I want to do, what do people tell me? Well, why do you need $500,000? I'll get that cheaper
right,
for you. You could do this, this, and this.
right.
But if I say, how can I make this happen? Well,
Yeah.
that then invites them to be a part of the solution.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Yeah, I've got a CEO that I'm doing some executive coaching with now on his fundraising, and your communication with major donors has to be inside. Don't send them brochures. Don't send them PR stuff. They're going to get that anyway. Your communication with them has to be the inside look. Make them part of it. People want to belong. With donors, we so often think we're asking them for money, and we've got this institution in need, and it's unequal. It's not at all. We got a
Mm,
lot more to give them than they got to give us.
hello.
I got one of the greatest. Did I press a button? Oh,
No, you're good. You're good. Can you hear
oh,
me?
okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you're good.
I got one of the greatest Christian institutions in the country that they can be a part of, and all they've got's money. So it's more than an even matchup. But we go into fundraising too often thinking that we are somehow begging, we're somehow there in the driver's seat and all. No, if they don't want to give, kick the dust off, go down the road.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, it's just moving on to the person who God has in store
Yep.
to
And the
help
Lord
us.
has
To help
people.
us.
Yep.
Now,
Yep.
you use a great analogy. I don't want to get ahead of you too much, but you say we should be more like baseball managers than football coaches. What do you have in mind with that?
Yeah, that's been an interesting one, and it really does work. I mean, a football coach, we kind of emulate that, especially in the Christian world. Unfortunately, we emulate them as the ideal leader. They're all in charge. Everything's pre-planned down to the second. Nick Saban, nobody leaves a shirt untucked. Everything
Yeah.
happens. He's on top of the whole, and they're just the focus is on them. In opportunity leadership, I think it's more like a baseball manager who's back in the dugout, knows everybody's strengths and weaknesses, knows when they come on strong and when they've got a challenge, knows how to mix that right mix of players at the right time in the right place, gives them a lot of flexibility to do their gift in their way, which is different from somebody else's way, but is still in charge enough to mix it up when they need to and be strategic when they need to or stay back when they need to. And here's
Mm,
the illustration that to me is really important. When you're watching a football game and the pressure's on at the end, the camera always goes to the coach.
yeah,
You're
sure.
watching a baseball game, the World Series, and the pressure's on, the camera goes to the player. And as
Hmm.
leaders, we need to turn the cameras on the players, not on ourselves. But we
Hmm.
like and are drawn to that football model because it does center everything around the leader. And I'm not sure that's very biblical.
Wow. Interesting. Yeah. When you're saying that, I can just see the image of a pitcher sweating it out, thinking
Yeah.
about what they're working through
Yeah.
as they're like what they're going to throw next.
Yeah.
Interesting. So
Yeah.
like in that case, so the players, who are the players in that analogy?
Well, I think that in that analogy, every player has a different set of abilities.
Hmm.
And so they're all, I mean, you line them up together and they don't look that different for the most part. So
Sure.
how does the manager know which one fits in which role at which time? And
Hmm.
I think that's the skill of the manager to figure that out, not to go out and have them just respond to the orders the manager gives. And so, yeah, there's direction, there's inspiration, there's all that kind of stuff, but it's really creating a whole different dynamic of leadership than thinking about football, which is, very under. I mean, last weekend we had a big game on campus, a really important game, and we won. And so I went down. I was going to talk to the coach, like, in the last 2 minutes just before it was over. We were up like by 2 touchdowns. And so I go down and I'm behind the team and I'm trying to get through the players and they're all slapping each other on the back and having a great time. I start to go up to the coach and he is screaming at the refs. He's fighting for every inch. He's frustrated they didn't get this done, this thing done, this thing done. I mean, good for him. That's what a football coach needs to do, but not a leader of a university or a leader of a church or whatever. That's not how we operate. And, so it's a completely different model, but we have captured kind of that image in the church of this ideal Tony Dungy, Nick Saban kind of total control as the ideal of leadership. And I think it's completely wrong.
Yeah, that's really interesting. One of the things that a future plan or a long range plan does is it gives you a tool for evaluation. Like you evaluate yourself based upon that. So,
Right.
for instance, I mean, I've had people tell me this. I mean, it's a regular thing for leaders to have. Like, okay, you have your strategic plan, then every step, every agenda item relates to that point in the strategic
Right.
plan. So we don't talk about anything that's not a part of the strategic
Right.
plan. But
Right.
at the same time, but it does provide an avenue to say, all right, here's how we done. Now you talk about something called future focused evaluation. So
Yeah.
how is it? What? Because obviously you have to evaluate what you're doing. So how
You
does
do.
evaluation look in an
Yeah.
opportunity leadership scenario?
Yeah. Well, there's a couple of different issues there. Let me just hit real quickly on them. Evaluation, I think, is very important. But there's a whole bunch again. There's a whole bunch of consultants who make a whole bunch of money that says if you can't measure it, it's not of value. That's not true at all. I can't measure
Okay.
the things that matter most on this campus. I can't measure the change in a student's heart. I can't measure the transformation when a student gets a vision for what God's going to do in their life. I can't measure the stuff that matters most. I can measure. Yeah, you drove through the campus. You can look at the buildings. You can look at the enrollment. All that stuff's really nice, but that's not the measure of this place. So the stuff that
Mm,
matters most, you cannot measure. So I do not believe in that. I do believe in evaluation with my team and with me. I just had my annual evaluation. We do it every single year, no matter what, no matter how good it's going or how bad it's going. Because as leaders, if you don't, then the pressure builds up until there's an explosion. Somebody's going to
mm,
get fired. There's going to be something nasty happen. And so you've got to release that pressure valve periodically as a leader with your evaluation and with your team. And,
mm,
but institutionally, we do every 3 years a deep dive evaluation on every department of the school. And so they run in a rotating basis. So we're not doing them all at the same time. And we're going to go
yes.
deep dive on everything. But, future focused evaluation to me is this concept of when somebody who works with us messes up, what do? We tell them they did wrong. They already know they did wrong, probably. We tell them how to do it differently. We put limitations on. We put guardrails on. We put them under heavier accountability, and then expect them to perform. No,
Mm,
I think it's much better to say, look, you messed up. Let's talk about it straight. How could you do it differently next time? Help them to help create that solution, and then say, how's it going to be different going forward? And my great illustration of that, which is I'm a kind of love history and found that when and in fact it's a Mississippi story that when U.S. Grant was here in Mississippi, leading the Western Army, his father, who he did not get along with, tried to come and make money off the army and brought a couple of Jewish guys with him to do it. And Grant put out an order to expunge all the Jews from Mississippi and Alabama or whatever. And Lincoln heard about it, and Lincoln said, "No, we're not doing that." Lincoln apologized for him, made Grant apologize for him, and rescinded the order. And it was about 6 weeks later that Lincoln brought Grant in and gave him control of the Army of Virginia, and gave him a promotion because of how he responded to the correction. So future focused evaluation to me is not how do I beat somebody up because they messed up. Everybody's going to mess up, but how do I help them become better going to the future, and then help them to create their own accountability structures for that. So
that's wonderful. Like it has to be it have a direction to it. Like we're going somewhere, and even in this moment of correction, this is opportunity for us to take a step forward.
Correction. God uses correction to help us all be stronger. And if we give up iron sharpens iron, and that's part of the reason organizations and churches and educational institutions get in trouble because they don't confront this stuff. I was talking with one of my team today who's having trouble with an employee, and I said, he wanted to take a step, and I said, you can do that, and then we'll take another one. We'll take another one. 6 months from now, we'll be in the same spot, or you just go ahead and get it over with, because it needs to happen. And sometimes you just got to take some hard action to help people. Everybody's valuable. The question is, are they in the right spot and where God wants them to be? And once in a while, we all need a crane to get moved out of spots where we're comfortable.
Yeah. Yeah. I've had a few of those cranes, and I'm thankful for them. I'm not at the time.
Exactly. Yep. They're painful at the moment.
Yeah. So when you hear somebody like, because this is almost like a major theme of your life and leadership, and it's so dominant that people are thinking about long range plans. I mean, imagine a few of my colleagues or people who are serving as leaders think, oh, how can I even get started with this? It just seems like it's so ingrained in leadership culture to have long range plans. What's the best? I mean, beyond buying your book and listening to this podcast another time.
Yeah, that's the main thing. Buy a case of the books. That's the key. If you do that, every problem solved.
That's right.
No.
Where do they start?
It is a process. You can't just jump in. In fact, I detail the process in the book, because if you just jump in, if you stand up tomorrow and you say, we're not going to have a plan, you're going to get fired. It will. It'll happen. You will get fired. You've got to, you got to, let the water boil in the kettle, and you got to be in there for a while with it to transfer over. But the best way to do it is by looking back. So you're brand new at the seminary there. There are long-range plans sitting on your shelf, and I guarantee you, 95% of the stuff in those plans never got done. I guarantee you. Go look at them. Show that stuff to the board. Summarize that stuff. Then what did get done? What were the good things? How much of that came out of the plan? How much of that came out of opportunity? And start to see the pattern. And when you see the pattern looking back, you got the courage to go forward. And, it's to me, all of us in leadership, when we look ahead, we say, yikes, how are we going to make it? Political world's changing, the culture's changing, the economics are so hard, the margins, how are we going to make it? And then you look back and you say, wow, look what God did. But the obstacles in the back look the same as the obstacles in the front. We just don't know yet how God's going to lead. So you can only really go forward by looking in the rearview mirror. You got to look back and see where God has led and how God has helped. And as you do that, I mean, I got one school who really bought into opportunity leadership, but the board won't let them do it. So that the headmaster of the school every year presents, here's the strategic plan and here's what we did. And then along with it, here are the opportunities we had and here's what they did. And
good.
Over time, they're getting to the point to say, the good stuff comes out of the opportunities. It doesn't come out of the plan. And so It's not an all or nothing thing. You don't have to take this and, say, well, I'm never doing planning. You don't have to be me to, I'm never doing planning again, which I'm never doing planning again. But,
I'm sure.
but you don't have to
Yeah.
do it all at once. And you don't want to do it all at once, but you don't even have to. You can hybrid it. But it's
Yeah.
more a culture. Think about every time some opportunity comes, having the culture. And, I always look at mission, gifting, and capacity. Is
Yep.
it fit our mission? And
Yes.
we're not going to budge our mission one bit. Secondly, do we have the gifting? Do I have the right team, the right people? And so I
Yeah.
hire
Yeah.
people who have the ability to do a lot of different things. They're not high specialists. And then thirdly, do we have the capacity? Sometimes we got so much going on, we don't have the capacity to take on something else. Other times we got capacity. I just did one this week. It was real easy, a new program in MBA in China because we had capacity, 150 students, and bang, it was about a 30-minute decision. Wasn't hard at
Mm.
all because we had
Yeah.
capacity. We've already been in China. We've already worked that. We worked the mission. So opportunities come and go. Sometimes in the timing's wrong. But here's what I do know about opportunities: speed wins. Speed
Mm.
wins. You got to go
Mm.
fast. Christian organizations are way, way, way too slow.
Right. Oh, I love it. This is so helpful. And I know people who are watching me listen to you know, and if you know anything about me, where I am at this phase of my life, this is I feel like this is probably the most personal podcast interview I've had. Like of something like, well, Andy, you just welcomed us into exactly what you're. I mean, I needed this advice anyway. So thanks everybody for joining my leadership counseling session.
Hey, when we got together, I knew immediately you were you're already there, and probably just don't have some language for it yet, but you're already there. This is who you are, and I don't. But it's not a style thing. Any leader do this. It's not simply one style does it differently than another. Just build on style. But yeah, you're going to do it, and I can't wait to see what God's going to bring to you. I just
Amen.
can't.
Well, Roger, I always ask a question. The title of my podcast is More to the Story. And I wonder, you probably had several interviews, dozens of interviews probably about this book, but is there something about you that people don't know, a hobby that you have or something? There's more to the story of Roger Parrott?
Yeah, that I'd love to be a professional golfer, but it's not going to happen. And
Okay.
and job I'd really like on this campus is to be football coach, but they won't let me near the field.
Oh, yeah.
They won't even call my
someday.
special play. I send in my special play, they never call it. I don't know why.
Oh, man. It's great. Well, Roger, thank you for your time. It's such a blessing to talk to you. Appreciate being able to watch your leadership and to see what's happened at Belhaven, and for you to distill that into this book is a real blessing to the church and other institutions like WBS.
Thanks so much. What a treat.